I was in the Waves Hospital Corps.
Navy.
Navy. Today it's all one thing, Navy, men and women, but we were all Waves before. I went to Hunter College for my training. From there, I went down to Bethesda, Maryland. That was basic Hunter. And then I went to Maryland for my hospital training. From there, I went to Chelsea Naval. And I stayed there a while, and from there, I went down to Quonset Air Force Base in Rhode Island. Always in the hospital end of things.
So you never left the United States?
No, we were not allowed to. The boys that came from the Pacific, you see, when they brought them from the Pacific to California, they took off the worst cases, and the rest kept moving cross country, and we had some pretty bad cases of gangrene set in at Chelsea Naval. But for a while there, I was working with the families of the servicemen. There were a lot of babies born during wartime. Their wives and their families, we took good care of them. I was in the obstetrics, in the delivery room for a while. And down in Quonset Point, I had a funny thing happen on ward duty. The first night I was on, I had a corpsman on with me who had just come in. He hadn't given anybody a shot yet. So I told the boys, I said, boys, you got to get your shots. You've got your pick. You can have me, or you can have this young man who's in the position I was in once where he hadn't given a shot yet, just to an orange. Because they were looking at me and saying, I don't know if I want her, you know. And so they decided, they said, okay, we'll go with you. And they had nothing to worry about, you know. It isn't like you're going to expose them or anything. You just take a little bit of skin and... But they decided that I was better than the guy who had done the orange. But during the war, there were a lot of women who were not in the service, but they did their share. They worked in the Navy yards, riveting and doing all kinds of odd jobs and doing a good job of it to release the men to go in the service. And everyone was happy to do it. The feeling was great. I had my husband-to-be over in Italy with the 10th Mountain. And my brother was in the Navy. And I didn't know how I didn't even consult them. They just found out after I was sworn in. But they all were, I think they were pleased I went in. As hard as they tried to make us stay, get us to stay, they were always good to us. When the war was over, George got out before I did, because he, being overseas and in danger and all that, had more points to get out. And he did. He got out before I did. I spent my 21st birthday in boot camp. Well, there was a great deal of patriotism in World War II. Everybody was volunteering to go. Everybody wanted to do something, even the people who weren't in the service. And our mothers and fathers, they were all put on rations, practically, on certain items that were scarce. And all kinds of things. We had ration slips to buy our shoes if they were leather. And then all the women who couldn't go into the service, they volunteered in many different ways to take the place of men they needed, because they wouldn't send the women over in danger. And they just were glad to do it. What was it we used to call the women down at the Navy Yard?
Riveters.
Rosie the Riveters, and what a job they did, and they were proud. And they weren't even in the service, they were all volunteers. Yeah, we did get more independent, I think.
Yes, they did.
You'd have to say that. I never noticed that I was being deprived ever. But some women felt that way. And so this gave them a chance to, feel their way. And if you're not used to it, it takes a while to get used to being, ordered for everything you do. And that was kind of restrictive. And they were strict. When I was at Chelsea Naval, I went home to see my mother and father, and somehow I left my Liberty chit there. So I got back to the base, and I said, I don't know what I did with my Liberty chit. You probably left it home, they said. I said, I bet I did. I'll call my father. That's fine, but now you're going to be a prisoner at large till you find your liberty, Chit. That sounded dreadful to me, you know. I wasn't used to this confinement. And so I called my dad, and he says, we'll search everywhere for it. And they did, and thank God in a couple of days he found it down between cushions in the chair. And I said, get in here as fast as you can. And the doctor I was working for in obstetrics, he used to kid me that I was a prisoner at large. And he would bring me an apple a day or something like that, just to be funny. They did it lightheartedly, you know. But that was one of the strangest things that happened to me. My friends in the barracks with me, just to be funny, would wake me up in the middle of the night. Name and ring. What did you do? You can't leave this place. I said, I know. And they were all my friends, you know, but they were just putting it to me, having fun with it.
Yeah.
Everyone was in a very good mood that I worked with. You can't help but grow close to them. If somebody got a cake, somebody else would run over to the galley, get a knife, and bring it back. We'd have a regular party. And I went several times to New York with one of the girls that had danced with the New York Ballet. So we went down, and some of the people that she danced with picked us up. They took us out to dinner, backstage for the performance that night, and we had a great time. But we did things together, because wherever you were stationed, everybody wasn't from your hometown or your area. They were from all over. We didn't all get out at the same time. Now, some stayed in. I gave all my uniforms away to a girl that I'd been very friendly with. And so I gave them all to her because they're pretty expensive. I don't know, I just enjoyed every minute. But when they told me I could get out, I was eligible and could go home, I had to come up to Boston to be discharged. And they offer you everything under the sun. They'll give you higher ranks and anything to keep you in at that time. I said, no, thank you, men, but I'm glad I joined, and I was. I felt I was doing something being in a hospital, you know, rather than, although everything had to be done, but I was glad they put me in the hospital. It made me feel good. I went to a business school in Boston just to catch up with my secretarial work, because I wasn't going into a hospital. I wanted to get back to what I'd been doing, you know. So I thought the best thing was to take a review course, which I did. Bryant and Stratton Business School. And then I worked as a secretary. Before I went in the service, I worked for Dr. Frank Leahy, you know the Leahy Clinic? He was the founder of it, and it was a much smaller outfit on Commonwealth Avenue. And he was just the greatest, but you had to put down everything you had done before you came in. And when I said to them one day, why did you put me in the hospital corps? They said, well, you worked for Dr. Leahy. I said, yes, but I was a secretary, not a nurse. They said, 6 weeks at Bethesda and you'll be a nurse. Well, what I was very proud was when we were sworn in. I just barely made the 100 pounds. I ate bananas all the way into the weigh-in, hoping I could put on a couple of ounces. Anyhow, I made it. And then they called us up. We were sworn in Boston. But then we got a call from them, and they said that there was a big concert down at the Esplanade concert. And they needed a few of the girls down there to be sworn in as part of the ceremony, even though we'd already been sworn in. So we went down, and they re-swore us in. So I was sworn in twice, once at the concert. And I felt very proud. Well, we did ward duty. It was nothing to be on a ward all by yourself when they were short-handed. And then for a while I was in the diet kitchen. I had the diet kitchen at Quonset Point. You never knew what you'd get. Wherever you were needed, you went. I had one fellow, this is funny. He was enormous, the biggest man I ever met. And I was supposed to get the weight off him. And what they told me I had to feed him, I felt dreadful. It was awful, like livers, chopped up livers, chicken livers and things. And I felt so sorry for him. You know what I would do when we had a turkey? I'd have the chef at the main galley. I'd have him take one of the big legs, wrap it up in Reynolds wrap, and give it to me. And lights out, I'd put it under this guy's pillow so he'd have something to eat. Well, I didn't do him any favors because he wasn't losing the weight, but he talked me into it. So anyhow, the word came and they said, Phyllis, he's not losing a pound. And they said, you're going to have to take him over to Quonset Point, Rhode Island, the big hospital over there, and they'll see what they can do. And so I swore on his life, never tell him I gave you those turkey legs. And we took him over in an ambulance on the ferry, and we got him settled in Newport in the Naval Hospital. I never heard what happened to him, but I sure hope he lost his weight, because he wasn't doing any good under me. I couldn't bear to see him so hungry. Well, what was dramatic was if someone died. We had those things happen, too. But I hate to think how many would have been lost if we hadn't had all these hospitals all across the country. Once, when I was in the delivery room, when I was in obstetrics, we had twins born dead. And I had to take them down to our morgue. And their father was just outside there. He would see me when I left. And we didn't want him to know what I was doing and make it harder on him. So I wrapped them all up nice in blankets, put newspapers around it, and went out as though I had a bundle or something, not children. They were premature and they couldn't make it. I hated that assignment terribly when I had to do that. But the boys, I never saw one die. The whole time I was in, I never did. But I knew of some on other wards and things that were in bad shape who did. But we had them in for other things, too. We had a chief petty officer, old guy, and he always wanted poached eggs on toast. Well, those poached eggs followed me all through the whole time I was in there. And when they'd send them down from the main galley, they'd be cold, and he was always griping. I said, I don't blame you. I don't like it at all. I said, I'm going to get a dozen. We had a stove down in a little tiny kitchen. I said, I'm going to order a dozen eggs. And I'll get here in time in the morning so I can do your darn egg on toast. But you'll get them nice and hot. Oh, he was my buddy the whole time I was in Chelsea Naval. That was his happiest moment, he said, when he got hot eggs. Yeah, a lot of funny things happen. I think they all had their own meaning. And when you could do something nice for them, you loved it. It was a good feeling. If you did something and they got better or were okay. I am very, very glad I did it, but I want you to know that everybody was doing the same thing in or out of the service, the women and that. They made a lot of sacrifices at home.